Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady, and I'm joined today by Grace Scheussler. Now, Grace is known as the Graceful Renegade on Instagram. She is a motorcycle rider, overlander, traveler. She's also a filmmaker and cinematographer, which she has actually won an Emmy for some of her past productions. So we talk a lot about production on the road. We talk about traveling solo on a motorcycle. We talk about the transition in her life from one chapter to the next, where she found her path forward as an adventure traveler, motorcyclist, and filmmaker. So please enjoy my conversation with Grace Scheussler. And a special thanks to Onyx for their support of this week's podcast. Going further on your adventures is about having the right tools. The Onyx off-road app's intuitive maps make it easy to find trails and disperse camping. And their offline maps give you full GPS navigation capabilities, even without cell coverage. Personally, I use Onyx for every trip in North America because I always know who owns or manages the land that I'm traveling on. It also makes for a reliable track recorder, and I can filter the trails based on the four-wheel drive or motorcycle that I'm using. On my most recent trip in the Quartermaster, I used the Onyx to find trails near where I was staying in Joshua Tree. I used the difficulty rating and the elevation to determine which trails are best suited to the vehicle and the weather. Thanks again, Onyx, for your support of the Overland Journal podcast. Grace, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, and we get to hang out at Randy Perkins' house. So those that want to hear more about Randy's life, check out episode number 140. Isn't that right, Randy?
Yeah, 140.
140. Yeah, amazing journeys that Randy has had. And I'm on my way to I'm picking up the Quartermaster, and then I'm heading to Montana. But this is where you live. You live in Bend, Oregon, or near it, right?
Yeah, this is where I live.
Yeah, that's amazing. So your story is incredible. We had a little bit of a chance to talk yesterday and hear more about your past. But one of the things that you mentioned to me that I found has been fairly consistent in many of the interviews is that your parents took you traveling when you were young. You feel, well, first of all, what did you learn from your parents? And second of all, was that part of the inspiration for you to travel?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you get that travel bug very early, that's one of the ways that I think you carry that into your adult life. And I was also very fortunate too that I played high-level basketball up through college. And so I learned that appreciation for how hard work does pay off through athletics. And huge thank you to my dad for that. But no, I was very fortunate growing up. My parents loved to travel and would take my sister and I everywhere with them when they could. And, you know, as a result, it almost becomes normalized then.
Yeah.
And so when it feels normal, it's less uncomfortable than to leave the routine and go do something exciting. And so that's really where I picked it up at a very young age. And then obviously I've carried it with me till now.
And what are some of the places that you went with your family that were the most memorable, or you think maybe the most formative for you?
I think one of the best trips I did with my parents was when I was quite young. I think I was 8 or 9 years old when we went to Europe for the first time and went to London, went to Salzburg, went to Vienna, and just kind of bounced around a little bit in Western Europe. And it was wonderful for me because I started to realize, one, that I loved history as much as my dad. So my mom and sister would drop us off at museums and come pick us up later, which was great.
Yep.
But two, I really enjoyed just kind of being on the run with them. Like I loved hopping on a train. I loved going and just kind of being on the fly, which is essentially how I built my entire travel career later on.
Yeah,
and
sure.
That was just such an incredible experience. I know my sister says the same thing because she's also a travel buff like me. Like, if you start early, just like with anything, it's an easy muscle to flex when you get to be an adult.
And I think it's such an important lesson for kids is I believe that the more that you can expose children to places that are different,
right,
the more I think empathetic they can be, the more tolerant they can be of people that are different than they are, speak different languages, have different beliefs. And that's obviously one of the lessons that travel teaches us. But I think the earlier you can learn it in life,
absolutely,
makes a really big difference. Okay, so you travel with your parents, and then, and if I remember, you lived in, was it Missouri that you grew up in? Okay, so you grew up in Missouri, and somehow you have gotten from Missouri to to Bend, Oregon. Now, you ended up on a motorcycle. So tell me that story.
Well, my favorite story to tell about motorcycles is that I fell in love with motorcycles like a lot of young women do sometimes, watching like The Matrix and Trinity and Lara Croft. And, you have these essentially kind of badass women that do these really cool things and ride motorcycles. And so around 16, I floated the idea to my parents, and my father, being a physician, gave me a very hard no. But they said, the minute I was done with college or with school, at whatever capacity I did school, that I could have a bike of my own. I think with the idea that it would burn out of me, but
sure.
Much to my parents' chagrin, after I turned 22 and graduated from college, that next weekend after graduation, I got my endorsement and bought a bike the next week.
You're like,
so
check.
They were pretty furious, but they also couldn't say much at that point. But I then started road riding at age 22 and have been riding up until now, and didn't really get into adventure riding until I was about 31 or 32. But obviously, if you like being on two wheels, the first time you get off-road is the most remarkable time, I think, because you start to realize that exploration is endless, and you have the opportunity to go places you never thought you could.
And when you first started riding, or even when you were younger, did you ever get a chance to ride dirt bikes? Was that something that was...
No.
See, that's challenge. It was the same for me. I didn't learn dirt riding until later in life.
Right. And it's very funny. I'm actually really lucky. In about a week, I'm going up to Canada and I'm doing a dirt riding course, because I got thrown on dirt bikes in my 30s and no one ever taught me how to ride a dirt bike. It was just like, stand up and figure out the weight. And I'm excited to go up and actually learn a skill set. But no, I didn't get on a dirt bike until I think I was 32. And I grew up riding horses. Yeah. And that was just a very different thing.
But that would be helpful, though. Yeah. Balance and...
Yes.
And that's true for me, too. I mean, the first thing I rode wasn't a motorcycle; it was a horse.
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
Yeah. And my dad will tell me, he's like, "Oh, those motorcycles are so dangerous." I'm like, "Dad, how many times have you been in the ER because of a horse?"
Oh, I know. My mom.
I'm convinced that horses are more dangerous than motorcycles.
Oh, absolutely, because they have a mind of their own.
Totally, and they're gigantic.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot more weight there. Yeah. My mom still rides. She's 65 and she still rides almost every day. It's very impressive. Awesome. But
awesome.
I give her trouble all the time. Same thing, where I'm just like, you realize the animal you're on has a mind of its own and weighs a lot more than my motorcycle. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you may want the horse to go right, and it's going to go left.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, that's so funny. So you decide at some point to go from more street-focused motorcycling to some adventure motorcycling. Now, did you buy a bike and then start going, or did you borrow some bikes, or what was the plan?
Pretty much what happened was I was living in Portland and got divorced, and right before I moved out to Bend, Oregon, I had bought a BMW F700 GS, and I knew that I wanted to do more camping, more outside type of things, and I wanted to get more into the motorcycle world, because I just never really had the opportunity to do as much of it as I wanted. And so I moved out here. I started essentially doing some gravel roads on the bike, nothing too crazy, just, occasionally getting out and seeing where I could get to, and camping by myself, which learning how to camp by yourself in your 30s is an interesting way to go, but I did it, and here we are. But yeah.
What bike was that you started with?
F700.
F700. Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah.
And at some point you ended up with a Honda, right?
I did. Yeah. Okay.
And what was the reason for the change? Because an F700 is a great bike.
It's a wonderful bike. Yeah. I needed something lighter. And it's actually why I started to dive into the lighter bike realm. But I started working for an adventure touring company here in Bend, and I hopped on a CB500X, a Honda, during one of our Baja tours, which is a much lighter bike, a little less power, but way less top heavy. And I did so much better on that bike, doing a lot more of the challenging off-road stuff than I did with mine, to the point where I came home and I just decided that was the bike I needed to have. And so I got home from a trip in Baja, bought a 500, and essentially built it out myself and held on to it. And then that's the bike I ended up traveling and being all over North America on.
And if I remember, that bike is very much like a smaller adventure touring bike.
Yeah, very
but
much
it is lighter, isn't it?
Yes, much lighter.
And then were you able to get skid plates for it? And
absolutely. I've been very lucky to work with Outback Motortech for the last couple of years. Okay. So they completely hooked me up with skid plate, crash bars, essentially like a whole pannier system. So I
Yeah.
could load all my luggage and have the bike be safe when I did ultimately, crash a few times and drop it and whatever else.
It was funny when you showed me the picture of all the gear on the back of your
Oh,
motorcycle.
yeah.
And like we're all sensitive to it. Like after we've ridden for a while, you look
Yeah.
back at those first trips and all the stuff you bring. But I think everybody does that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, for those that are listening, if you're like, I'm always overloading my bike, we all did that.
We all do it.
We all
It's
did that.
100% how we have to do it.
And then when
too.
you have to pick it up a couple times,
Ugh.
or you start to find like, you do 2 or 3 trips and you're like, I've never used that thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
I never use the solar panel that I bring with me every time, or whatever that is.
It's the weeding out process.
And then you got to start get stuff out of there.
I think the first couple of weeks I was on the road, I was definitely overpacked. And then slowly over time, the things you don't use just kind of fall away.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in those moments where you do have crashes and drops, like I was in Big Sur and I took, I don't know if you've ever taken the old road that's up above Big Sur. It's a beautiful.
I don't think so.
It's a beautiful, just kind of gravel road. It's about 12 miles long, but you avoid all the traffic and you get all the views, and it's amazing. And
oh wow,
I had a local guy send me up there, but I had all my luggage on my bike and was having a great time. And next thing you know, I hit a rut and one of my luggage packs came loose and knocked me down, which is totally fine. It happens, but when you're in 90 degrees and your bike is horizontal and it weighs as much as it does, it takes a while and is a little unnerving to unpack everything, get the bike up and repack it. But
that was smart though. So you took everything off of
absolutely.
it to get the bike lighter and then strapped it all back on.
I mean, I would love to say I could deadlift 500 pounds, but I just don't think that's a reality.
Or maybe not too many times.
Yeah.
Not too many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how heavy those bikes are when they're laying flat. And why do they always lay flat downhill?
It's the worst. Every time.
They never lay flat uphill where it'd be easier.
Always the most inconvenient way the bike ends up. Yeah.
It's like, it's little lessons in humility for sure.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So you are working this bike out. You're finding that it's working for you. And if I remember, you took off on a multi-year journey.
Yeah.
Was it on that bike?
It was.
Okay.
So I started that journey and I essentially spent about a little over a year in North America.
Mm-hmm.
And was able to kind of go all through the Western US. And I know we talked about this a little bit last night, but one of the best pieces of advice that Sam Manicon gave me, other than writing everything down, was to take my time. So when I was in the Western US on the bike, I was also doing film projects with Alex Jacome, but I took my time and really explored the areas, took roads I normally wouldn't, wasn't just focused on getting from point A to point B. It was, what's around here that I would want to go see and explore. So did basically all of the Western US, went up through Canada. We didn't get all the way up to Alaska, but we got up to Prince George and made a lot of friends along the way and got to ride some incredible roads through BC that were just unreal. Then we did some time down in Baja and in Mexico. And once that was kind of up, I had a nice month here where I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And then I went to Asia for 3.5 months and rode bikes all through Asia and spent a lot of time in Vietnam. I loved Vietnam. That was by far my favorite place I got to travel there.
I've heard that from a lot of people.
Yeah, it's incredible. If you get the opportunity to, definitely go. Bali was great. I actually helped some friends run a tour there while I was there. They just needed a little bit of backup. Yeah, nice. They just needed a little backup. They had a big group that was there and very excited, but kind of needed somebody to be in the middle and take care of everybody and be calm, the calm perspective if things got weird, which we did have a couple instances with. Just you have a big group like that on the road. So that was kind of a nice dabble back in touring, but also made me remember why I left touring. And then I got to go to Thailand.
People who do that for a career, they have got to be saints. I mean,
I don't know how
incredible.
They do it.
I think some of them just really enjoy it.
They do. And it is very fun to watch people grow on a motorcycle over a condensed time period. Like, sometimes people come in with lesser skill sets and leave so much more comfortable on the bike, and it's so cool to see that. But you are also kind of a customer service agent the whole time, and that can be exhausting. And then
you have to be on 24/7. You really don't get any downtime. I mean, I think about like the trips that Bill Dragoo does, and Rawhide and everything else. Like, those people work so hard.
Absolutely. I mean, our Baja trips, when I was able to do them and kind of be a guide for them. I mean, it was from the minute the sun came up until 10 p.m. You were on the whole time. And it is exhausting. I would come home from those tours and sleep for 3 days. But it's also the most fun because, at that point too, I was still really new into my off-road riding. And so I was getting better every time I was going too. So it was
like
great.
School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you did your Western trip, pick out 2-3 places that you found that you really loved, that really resonated with you when you were traveling in the West. Was there some favorites? Or is there a thing that you find yourself looking for? Like you always look for some historic site, or you go watch the opera, I don't know, whatever.
I really try to hit historic if I can. I think one of my favorite parts of that summer that Alex and I had in the Western US was Yellowstone had been closed that June because I don't know if you remember, but they got an astronomical amount of rain and flooding.
Knocked out a bunch of roads.
And so they had to keep everything closed. We were just in the area the week they opened. And so they had canceled reservations. They had canceled, I think a lot of people who had planned trips there for the summer ended up not being able to go.
Right.
And so we, obviously wanted to go to Yellowstone, but couldn't. And all of a sudden we got a campsite. All of a sudden we had the whole park to ourselves. We rolled in there 2 days after they opened, and I've never heard of anyone getting to Yellowstone National Park and getting a campsite on site ever. And we had our pick of what we wanted.
And you took a selfie with the buffalo like everybody else does, right?
Oh man, the nightmare of watching people do that is quite terrifying.
Terrifying.
Yes. You're just like, please don't lose an arm in front of me.
It's like you wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
What made you think that was a good idea?
It's if you don't follow the National Park Service already, by the way, PSA for everybody, follow them on Instagram because they have memes that come up that are so funny about people touching things they shouldn't in the wild, and it's great. But we actually, we were doing a film project that ended up winning us an Emmy Award the following summer, but we got to essentially do Yellowstone National Park at sunrise with no one on the road with us.
Incredible.
And the things we got to see and film, no one else will be able to ever again. So being able to have that experience, I mean, that's one of my favorite stories to tell because I think Yellowstone is one of the most magical places we have out in the West, and being able to see it at that capacity was incredible.
Yeah, you had this serendipity of it being opened, and then you said yes to the opportunity.
Yes.
You didn't say, "Oh, we've got to be at this other place" or whatever. You just reshuffled your schedule. And
which is the beauty when you do kind of live on the road and don't have an agenda, is when the opportunities do present themselves like that, you jump on them and you get to have an experience like that a lot of other people won't get to have.
So when you look back on, I mean, first of all, it takes a lot of courage to decide I'm going to go leave and travel on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you learned about, or you could share with the audience about the process of leaving and going and making that decision? And maybe what were some of the things that you learned early on in the trip that you think would be beneficial for others to know?
I think one of the big things I want to stress is you don't have to go to the extreme like I did and sell everything and just live off a bike. I think there's other ways you can do it. I know a lot of people that do the RV or overlanding or van life. Those are all, I think, formidable options that you can take that aren't the extreme of what I did. I did the extreme because I think if I had the opportunity to do something maybe a little more comfortable, I would have. But the only tool I had at that time was my motorcycle, my knowledge of camping, and me just having one of those personalities where I like being thrown into the deep end of the pool and figuring out how to swim.
Sure.
And so I was very lucky after working in touring that I had some great contacts with Alpine Stars and with Outback Motor Tech and with a couple of other gear companies here, especially Giant Loop. Giant Loop was a great supporter of me in the beginning.
They're an awesome company.
Yeah, I mean,
They
Harold...
make some great products.
Yes, Harold retired this year, and Harold...
Did he really?
Yeah, he did.
Well, congrats, Harold, on retirement.
Harold, also, as always, I want to tell you I adore you and thank you for being so supportive. He was my number one guy for a while.
Yeah. And we need that. We need those. For me, it was similar. It was Wolfman Luggage.
It
was my very first motorcycle supporter, sponsor. Them and Kurt from Black Dog.
And Kurt's so awesome. I adore Kurt. Yeah, it's just... It was very much like I kind of told Harold that I was going to do, and then it was just, well, what do you need? Yeah. And having somebody that was that supportive at that time was so cool for me. But yeah, I just made the decision. I sold everything. I dropped my 2 adorable dogs to my parents in Missouri on their 80 acres because obviously they wouldn't miss me then. And I just went for it. But the thing that I learned pretty quickly, one is that it's exhausting, and it really starts to put you in an uncomfortable state where you grow very quickly. But
and it brings all kinds of stuff up.
It does. I had a lot of time during the pandemic where, I had gotten divorced right before the pandemic, and I really hadn't made peace with a lot of parts of that. And I just, like a lot of us, was so distracted by the things going on in the world and trying to, make life be somewhat normal that I never really addressed how I felt about a whole part of my life being over. And so the first couple of weeks for me were a lot of figuring out who I was actually, and being okay with letting go of who I had been, and becoming a new version of myself.
Starting a new chapter.
Yeah. And it was an incredible journey that I felt so lucky to have. And that was in the first couple of weeks. So once I got that down, it was really nice to, make peace with myself and then go, well, where can we go? What can I actually do on this bike that, is going to be something different? And then that's when I started working with the camera.
There's been a lot of divorces, new relationships, and new chapters formed on motorcycles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, like I got very lucky. I met Alex on the road, and we were best friends before we got together, and we're not together anymore, but it was a great season of life, and we had so much fun traveling together and filming together. And he was my mentor into how to use a camera, and just also how to be a videographer. I mean, everything I learned from him, and he essentially gave me a crash course of 10 years of everything he'd learned traveling all over the world and being an amazing videographer. And he got that into my head within a year. So being able to have that experience as well, again, being in the deep end of the pool, right? That's me. And it was just wonderful for me because I essentially was given a life that I could have only dreamed of within a year of leaving.
Now, tell me a little bit about the film that you two produced that resulted in the Emmy.
Well, it was when we were in Yellowstone is kind of where it started. And Alex, at a time in his career where he was kind of looking for the next thing, when we kind of decided to do this trip, we originally said we'd do 2 weeks and film Yellowstone and Teton National Park. And it ended up being, I think, 11 weeks we did on the road together. But we really focused on that area because it was so vacant of tourists at the time. And being able to capture what we did was just so rare. We wanted to jump on the opportunity, but the bigger piece for us obviously was the storytelling aspect of it. So when we sat down to write the script, one of the things we talked about together, and it's called limits, but we talked about how the things we think are limits aren't exactly limits. They're just kind of the blocks in our mind sometimes.
Constructs,
and so writing a script around that during a time where I was coming out of that and realizing that my limits didn't apply to me anymore. And he was also kind of having that himself in his own way. It just really easily put that script together, and it's, just under a 4-minute little inspirational storytelling film, but it's why we were able to get what we did, get the shots we did, and be able to just show the majesty of Wyoming and Montana and how cool it is out there.
And the timing was good too, because the TV show was doing well, and there was a lot of interest in Yellowstone and all of that. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And then from there, you went on within the last few years, and you did a project with some veterans up to Tuktoyaktuk on motorcycles.
One of the best things I've ever done with my life. I still, to this day, I tell the guys all the time, it's the greatest honor of my life to be able to do that trip. But I actually came home from Asia and was very disenchanted with the social media aspect of everything. I really wanted to...
It's exhausting.
It is, and I'm sure we'll talk on that more later, but I really wanted to just be a videographer and find a way to do that. And my buddy Brady, who's Meerkat ADV on social media, and he's pretty big with the veteran ADV community, but he called me and he needed a videographer to go with these 7 veterans up to Tuktoyaktuk in the Arctic Circle and back. They wanted to do this trip to also raise awareness about the veteran and active duty suicide epidemic in the military. And so he called me and just thought, hey, could you just figure out a way to come film some of this and put some kind of video together, of course. And so I immediately said yes, because I had been home for 3 days and was having an identity crisis of what am I going to do next? And it's nice that the universe delivers when you least expect it, And so I packed my bags. I came right back to Oregon and met up with everybody. And that was my entire June last year. And it was one of...
And you used that same bike, the 500?
No. So I brought my 500. I didn't ride the whole time. We had a chase truck.
That's helpful for shooting.
Yeah. One of our vets, my buddy Billy, he doesn't ride, but he wanted to be a part of the trip. And so when you also have that many guys and they're not really used to living off of bikes full time, having a chase truck is really convenient. Also, just for emergencies, tires. I mean, when we got to the Dempster, as you can probably imagine, we blew so many tires on the truck, on bikes, fork seals, everything. So it was nice to be in the truck. But yeah, we had a great kind of sense of camaraderie then. I also had so much filming equipment that like I couldn't imagine doing that on a bike.
Yeah.
It would be way too much. So it worked out.
It would
perfect.
be a different film, right?
Yes. Yeah. And because we had the truck and I didn't have to do it on a bike, we were able to make the incredible film we did, which is essentially...
What's the name of the film?
It's called Silent Battles, Riding for Life.
And is it out now?
Yes. It's on my YouTube page. It just got released, I think the last 2 weeks, but...
Oh, how cool. Perfect timing.
It's an incredible film and it's intense. It touches on some very hard subjects, but it's also something I think our country needs to hear because unless you are a part of a military community or family, I don't think many people understand just the tragedy that's kind of happening with the mental health of our vets and our active duty guys. And, you know, the numbers are so astronomical.
Yeah.
You know, I know they say 17 a day, but it's looking at more like 25 a day at this point, and that's something terrible that we need to try and counter as best we can.
Well, and I appreciate you as a veteran myself. I appreciate you taking the time to tell that story and to give them a voice. These guys have sacrificed so much, not only of themselves, but for their country and for all of us, that we do have a responsibility in the ways that we can to provide them with support. And for our veterans that are listening, you're not alone. Reach out to me. You can reach me at scott.a.brady on Instagram, and I'll help you or I'll put you in touch with someone who can. But you're not alone. You're respected and cared for, and there's people that are available to help. So.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest and most fascinating aspects of this whole thing for me was I appreciated so much the willingness of the guys on the trip and pretty much any vet we met along the way of the community of wanting to take care of each other. But I think sometimes feeling a disconnect from one another at the same time. And so the idea that vets can help vets is something that I really wanted to push at the film too, because you can have, you know, the average person sit down and have a conversation, but it's another veteran that's going to sit down and understand on a deeper level than a regular citizen could. Yeah. And so, I mean, again, also if anyone needs someone to talk to, you can always reach out to me on social media. I always say that, but
what's your handle on Instagram?
I'm the Graceful Renegade on all social media. You can also email me at scheusslergrace@gmail.com. But yes, just anything you can ever do to help the veteran community, I'm always on board. I have Navy in my family, and they've been so supportive of this project, and it's been great to see them push it amongst their, you know, the people they work with as well.
No, that's incredible work, and you know, I look forward to hearing the feedback from people who get a chance to watch your film. So that's quite an accomplishment.
I also wanted to take a brief moment to thank all of you for listening to the Overland Journal podcast. By listening to this podcast and subscribing to the Overland Journal magazine, you're supporting our employee-owned and veteran-owned business. Impartial reviews and in-depth content like this would not be possible without your support. If you enjoy the podcast, I think you'd really love the print magazine as well. And 100% of that subscription price goes back into creating the content like you're listening to right now. And as a special thank you for your loyalty, we're giving 20% off any subscription. And that even includes our special lifetime subscription, which includes numerous lifetime-only benefits. You can go to overlandjournal.com and use the code OverlandPodcast at checkout. Again, that's code OverlandPodcast at checkout, and that'll give you 20% off. I sincerely appreciate your support.
You really went from like 2 years on the road to Southeast Asia to Tuktoyaktuk, which, you know, that's the only place you can really hit the Arctic Ocean on a road, unless you get special permissions in Prudhoe Bay, which is hard to get.
Yeah.
So you get very close in Prudhoe Bay, but you don't actually get to the water with your motorcycle or your four-wheel drive. So that's an incredible accomplishment, and that's on the summer road, which isn't really that old. You know, it's maybe 5-6 years old.
2019, I believe.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So quite the accomplishment with all of that.
It was a fun road. I mean, we definitely had our moments, that's for sure. And there's parts of that road that are they're gnarly even for the most seasoned rider, I would say. Obviously,
the gravel in places,
the gravel and the dirt is unlike anything you've ever really been on. And they also they do a lot of that chemical spray to try and keep dust down. And we actually had one of our guys, Carl, he was in KTM, but it got all of the dust and mud got so caked in from the chemical spray that his bike overheated and shut down right as we were rolling into Eagle Plains. Great timing.
Wow.
But, we were then in the shop with him, just like trying to get all of it off because, it was just kind of a nightmare. But that's the type of stuff you run into up there. Obviously, tires go left and right too.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's a constant no matter
what.
Like
what an outpost Eagle Plains is.
Oh, Eagle Plains is a riot. I mean, it's just...
I don't know how it's changed since the summer road opened, but like...
Probably not at all.
I mean, it's like there's a little restaurant, there's a little hotel, there's a gas station, there's obviously like a big mechanic shop because everybody would need that.
That's what you got,
And in the wintertime, that's where they shut the road down.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally like...
It's incredible.
Block it at that point when the whiteouts happen.
Yeah, so. I can't imagine being up there during winter. I'm sure it's quite a sight. But
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It'd be hard. It's very hard to do on a motorcycle. People have done it, but it's very difficult.
I'll leave that for the people that like doing that on motorcycles. I'd much rather be in a truck at that point.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So you complete that project. What are some of the lessons that you learned from traveling with the veterans? What were some of the takeaways that you had, or maybe some changes in perception, or some things you learned about yourself on that trip with those guys?
I think it was just a reminder of everything that I independently had learned on the road, which is that time is the most precious resource we have. And I think
the one thing we can't make more of.
Exactly.
Right?
And it's the one thing that we spend without ever realizing what our bank account says, right? Like, we don't know how much time we have ever. I could live to be 100 or I could drop dead in 2 days. We just don't know. And being a part of something like that with those guys, especially coming off the trip I did just on my own, was a very formative moment of realizing that I just wanted to live my life the best I could, to see as much as I could and experience as much as I could, but also to value more than anything the people in my life and to not take them for granted, because being able to bond with a group of people like I did on that trip really teaches you the value of what human connection can do for mental and emotional health in so many positive ways. But
we're supposed to have that.
Yeah, we're supposed to have community, and we're supposed to, we're herd animals, whether people realize it or not. We're meant to be a part of a village and have that supplemental part of our lives from other human beings. And I really just loved coming away from that and knowing that I wanted to make the most of every minute I had of my life. And I think a lot of those guys felt the same way. It's very special to do something like what we did and to walk away very proud with what we did, and also to go home to our families and show, what we put the work in for. But I think if I can ever, I say this message on my social media and in a lot of my videos all the time, it's just take advantage of the time you have. One of the biggest regrets, I know we read these articles all the time of people on their deathbed, right, is I wish I was less focused on my job or money or all these other things that didn't matter. I wish I was more focused on spending time with my kids, with my wife, with my friends, going on that trip I always wanted to go on but never got there. I think those are the things to focus on while we're alive so that we don't get to the end of the road and wish we'd done things differently.
And that's the challenge with social media, is that people will spend 3 or 4 hours a day with people that they've never met.
Absolutely.
And human beings are supposed to have in-person connection. We're supposed to be struggling, overcoming, working together in person.
Yeah.
And so I think people have more connections than they've ever had, but they've never felt more alone.
Yeah.
And I think that's just because we aren't spending enough time with people close to us.
Absolutely. And we had enough of an issue with that during the pandemic. And I think you add the complete rise of social media along with that. It's just completely stunted, I think, our social skills as human beings. And, I do think there are a lot of people that do try to put the phone over here and be present when they're with other people. But there is a vast majority, I think, particularly in Western culture, that is just so phone focused. I actually was going to tell you, I tried and very, very much so failed to start a trend in, I think, the spring I was trying to start a project called the 500 Hours Project, where I challenged people to take 500 hours off social media, which is about 3 weeks. And I did it. My partner did it. And, I had a couple other friends do it with us. And it was an incredible experience. Of course, I could get no one to do it with us other than kind of our
Did you announce
group.
it on social media?
I did. And no one wanted to
I'm
partake.
kidding.
No, but it's kind of.
But like, how do you do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how do you do
but
it?
it was like, I'm going to give this a try and I'll let people know how it went. And it was like those 3 weeks were so great. I was so present. It felt like I was, back on the road again. Because when you're living on the road, you're so present in every second of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And having that phone just be completely somewhere else and only around if I needed to find somebody or make a quick call was so wonderful. But I think about that all the time, and it's something
I think it's a good exercise.
Yeah.
To also remind yourself that you can be off of it.
Absolutely.
And probably the easiest way to address it, I think, for most people is just take the social media off of the phone.
Right, which you've done.
And I have an iPad mini that, when I need to get on and make a post, I just schedule it as part of my work day, and I do that, but I don't have it like this constant ping of, especially notifications. Like if you can start with the notifications off, then get the apps off your phone.
Right.
Onto another device, then I think it's really powerful. Yeah.
Well, and again, if you do, I know there's a lot of people that, and I agree 100%, I have it with my work as well, that need it as a marketing tool or just, to be out there. But if you can schedule it in your work day and have it be work related only, it's super healthy. Just have it be a part of that versus the constant, kind of like waiting to hear a ping, waiting to hear a notification. Like there's nothing worse than that. It's just...
Well, and I think a lot of people start with the intention of, I'm going to go on to Instagram and I'm going to make this great post with this beautiful photograph that I took. But they never actually get the post done because they spent 3 hours scrolling. Scrolling.
Yes.
So the thing that they opened the app to do never ended up happening.
Right.
And they lost all that time. Like you said, the time is the one thing. Like Bill Gates has just as much time as you and I do.
Yeah.
In a day, no matter how much money he has, he can't make more time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really about how we spend it.
Yeah, and I'm not the first person to say I'm in a in an unbelievably great financial situation, but the happiest I've ever been was when I was broke and money didn't really matter. I had enough money to live, and that was all I needed. It's a very different way of being versus chasing. It's kind of that mentality. I think Americans have this especially, where it's, if I can get here, I can get this job, or I can get to this point, then I can relax, or then I can be happy, or then whatever else. And the unfortunate reality of that is getting to those milestones isn't what's going to make you happy. Being happy in the present is what's going to make your life matter that much more to you.
That's all we have, actually, is this moment. Because anything 5 minutes ago was in the past.
Absolutely.
Anything 5 minutes from now is not guaranteed. It's in the future. It's not in the present. And it's very difficult. And it's required a lot of work on my part. And I still work on it every single day to be more present.
Yeah.
And to give myself some grace about, like, what are you running so hard towards?
Absolutely.
Why are you pushing?
I have that difficulty with my personality. I'm sure you do too, where sometimes it's what's next? What's my next project? And one of the best things I did for myself this summer is, we wrapped production on Silent Battles a couple weeks ago. And I basically said, until the end of August, I'm not going to touch a project. I'm not going to sign on for anything. I'm going to just take a couple weeks and decompress, be off my computer, go out and hike, spend time with my dog, spend time with my partner, explore Oregon, because I have one of the most beautiful backyards in the world.
True.
And really just be here. And it's been such a blessing for me, because that nice ability to slow down is something we lose. And it's nice to have that reminder and know you can do it again.
I think creatives really need that. It's one of the things that I really respect about Sinway Xavier, that works with us on a bunch of projects, is that he will intentionally set up time to go play outside.
Yeah.
Whether it's skiing or mountain biking or taking his truck onto some unnamed road with no planned outcome, just going and being outside. And I think that recharges, for him at least, it recharges those creative impulses that he's so good at.
100%.
But I think we need that.
I don't think I've shared this with a lot of people, but I didn't ride a motorcycle for a month and a half. I took a huge break because It had, I got done with the giant loop ride where we premiered Silent Battles, and it was an incredible weekend. I had a great time. I got to do a ton of fun riding, but I came home and also just like realized that the luster had worn off. And so I think sometimes giving yourself those breathers and breaks, even from things you love doing, is really important and healthy.
Yeah, no, that hits home for me. I just finished a 20-year project.
Right.
And I'm like, people are like, what's next? I'm like, no, I got nothing.
Yeah. But
right now,
it's probably nice. Yeah.
Right now I got nothing. And I'm not even upset about it. I literally don't have anything planned other than spending time with my family and doing creative projects, which I'm excited to do. So, but I think I needed that.
Yeah. So. Well, one, it's 7 continents, 20 years is a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
And really, really something cool to just show for all the work you've put in. But also it's probably nice to have a breather.
Yeah. Need a breather.
Yeah.
Totally need a breather. So what, if you were to give some advice to someone who wants to start capturing content off of a motorcycle, what's some of the gear that you use? What are some of the tricks or the little lessons that you've learned along the way about storytelling and about capture? How can someone learn to tell their own story?
That is one of the things that is becoming increasingly more difficult with how, particularly if you want to get into an entity like YouTube and a platform like YouTube, because, and I'll take this just from the adventure motorcycle perspective, you have a lot of incredible riding videos. There's a lot of like really just very skilled, very talented riders out there that are making cool stuff. But what you need to understand, and this is just coming from my experience in the last 3 years of social media being my life, is that you need to find the way that you're unique. You need to find what's different about you that's going to make you stand out. And that's what you need to focus on. For me, how I did that was, when I started out, I was taking terrible video because I was learning how to take video. But what made me different was I was storytelling the whole time. I had a narrative in the background of all of my videos talking about where I was going, how it was impacting me, why it was important for me personally, and just, really documenting my journey. And that's what drew people into me originally.
Yeah.
If you can find a way to do what's unique to you, that is what, 100% should be where your head's at. But start slow. Like if you want to get into video, start with, honestly, the Osmo, which I know we talked about before we got rolling. It's a great little camera. It takes incredible 4K video. And it's got a little gimbal on it. If you want to try drones are really fun, especially if you're a video gamer. That people tend to love that. But just start small. And if you really love it, great. Then you can move on to the next camera. I mean, cameras are getting easier and easier to handle. The tech is getting way better. I dove into the deep end and got a Sony a7S III pretty much right off the bat because I had also had the experience filming with Alex, and that was the camera he used. But I love that camera, and and it's a great videography camera, and I've filmed all of my docs on it. But start small. That's always what I would advise, because you can do a lot of really cool footage and make a lot of really cool videos with a really tiny camera now. And
if you can make the camera not shake, and you can capture good audio,
which is, again,
you're like 90% there.
Absolutely. Again, why I recommend, and I love DJI's products, but why I recommend the Osmo is because it has the gimbal on it. So shaking is going to be very minimal, as long as you're actually just being mindful about what you're doing. Your video is going to look professionally done.
Yeah, that's right. So, and then now they have where the mics, I mean, we've got them on right here.
Yeah, but they come with
the
microphones.
Mics, you can pair it to the Osmo. And
I mean, again,
incredible.
The tech we have is getting better and better all the time. So just start with something little, and then if you end up wanting to do big time footage, just take your time to get there.
Yeah. No, it's about being vulnerable, connecting with your audience, and then kind of staying true to what you started with. One of the things that I see people challenged with is that they'll start off as the BMW GS guy, and he's learning and he's making mistakes and he's very relatable, and people become true fans. And then you see him, he starts to get some success and he gets some sponsorship, and the next thing you know, he's driving, some expensive truck that he's now nobody like what he started off as. And then they wonder why their views and their engagement goes down, because they're now a totally different person.
Absolutely.
So I think, and that's not wrong. It's just be aware that people started watching you and you got all of your traffic from the fact that you were this way.
Absolutely.
And if you change that, you can lose a lot of your audience.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the greatest examples I can give for this and consistency paying off is, my buddy Ben, who's Dork in the Road on YouTube and social media. He has stayed so consistent with his videos and his brand for the last couple of years, which is why he went from having 7,000 followers to I think he's almost 130K.
There you go.
In a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And it's because, one, he's very relatable, he's very funny, and he just stays with the program.
Yeah.
And a lot of people love that. And being able to kind of find your niche, like I was saying earlier, if you find your niche in your pocket, just stay with that.
Yeah.
It's going to take time. Social media isn't what it used to be anymore. You don't go viral and have 100,000 followers. It's just not reality anymore.
Not likely.
No, but if you can
Unusual.
stick with the program and just keep with it, you will build over time. It's just going to take more time.
Yeah, it takes more time. And then not to expect that you're going to necessarily earn a living from it. I think if you go into the creative process with it's got to be your income, I think it compromises a lot of things that will actually allow you to build an audience long term.
Yeah.
So you see that where people chase the dollars too soon. Build yourself up, build your skills, build your audience, build those connections, and then people will approach you.
Absolutely.
Like you've probably experienced. People probably reach out to you now and they say, "Hey, how can we work with you on your travels?"
And there is definitely a certain realm of influencer that will continue to make a living from it, but those people are already established. Mm-hmm. The age of becoming an influencer is very few and far between anymore, and it's not anything anyone should ever expect.
Yeah.
It is so much more difficult to be one of those people. Most of the influencers that I do know now, particularly in the motorcycle world, are no longer doing it as frequently because they're not making the money they used to. That's right. It's just the industry and social media platforms have changed so much in such a short period of time. Yeah. But it's just, you got to love it. That's the bottom line. You got to love making videos. You got to love what you're doing. Otherwise, you'll probably have fun with it for a while and then burn out.
And people can see it. They can see the difference. When you're having a good time, people know you're having a good time and they know that you enjoy what you're doing. And and I'm not particularly relatable or funny, which is why I interview people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. On the contrary, I do think you're very relatable and funny. But
well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So, what is next for you? What's coming up? It's coming down the pipe.
I've got a great trip in BC next week where I get to ride some off-road motorcycles, which I'm greatly looking forward to. I know I touched on that, and it's with the E-Traction guys up in BC. And they've been great. They're having Ben and I up there to hang out with a group of people and learn how to ride off-road better, which will be great for me. I always want to learn how to improve. But other than that, I've got a lot of irons in the fire. It's just, kind of like I mentioned, I'm going to wait till that first week of September before I start making any big decisions. I've got possibility about going to Nepal, maybe back to Asia.
That'd be amazing.
There's just a couple of things on the horizon that are potentials. But right now, I think the most important thing that I've been doing for the last few weeks is just being here and enjoying being here and getting good sleep and really having fun out in Oregon.
And you bought a new motorcycle, didn't you?
And I bought a new motorcycle.
So tell us about the new motorcycle.
Yeah.
The thing's pretty rowdy compared to your outgoing motorcycle.
Yeah.
Or maybe you'll keep them both.
I feel like that's kind of what happens. You're always kind of in and out of motorcycles. There's never one bike for you. It just kind of shifts with what you're focusing on. And one of the great shifts that I've been experiencing this summer is I'm getting into smaller bike, dual sport type of stuff. It's what I love doing. I love being outside in the backcountry. I'd much rather be off-road than on pavement. So I sold my touring bike, my Transalp, and essentially bought Randy's KTM 450.
That thing looks wicked.
It looks like so much fun. So that's going to be a nice addition to my garage. And
what do they call a 450? The fastest way to the emergency room?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
It's like zero to the emergency room is the quickest way possible.
I ride like a grandma, so hopefully that'll help counter that a bit. Yeah,
it should. It should.
But yeah, I'm very excited about that, and it'll be great too because my partner is a big overlander. So being able to kind of have that together where he can be in his truck and I can be on my bike and we can go explore is something I can't wait
I was
for.
Laughing so hard at his Tundra stories last night.
I know.
He is a great storyteller himself.
He is,
it was so funny.
Yeah.
The number of times he got stuck in that truck. So
he has been stuck in that truck so many times, but he always manages to get out of it, which is the key.
Well,
right?
but I love like the hammock story. It was like basically the hammock was how he was relaxing and keeping the truck from sliding off the cliff.
Pretty much,
So that's pretty awesome.
Kill two birds with one stone,
I thought that was so hilarious. So now you're also looking to do more video production work. So, we have a lot of people in the industry that listen to the podcast. So if anybody is looking for commercial production, or if you need a videographer to come on your expedition, Grace you're looking for those kinds of opportunities. So please reach out to her if that's something that you need. How else do people follow you? You talked about your Instagram handle. Is your YouTube handle the same?
My YouTube is also The Graceful Renegade. Yes. Yeah. And usually the best way to get in touch with me is either to DM me on Instagram or to send me an email. And my email again is scheusslergrace@gmail.com. It's super easy to find via my website. My website is also thegracefulrenegade.com because that's my production company. But yeah, essentially what I plan to do for the future is do expedition level filming. That's what I'm good at. I'm a guerrilla filmmaker. That's my bread and butter. So it's taking my gear on trips, whether they're motorcycle or overland or whatever, and just getting out into the world and showing people just how beautiful it is out there and the types of things they can get out and experience.
Well, Grace, you are an inspiration. It's so cool to hear the stories of your life and the things that you've accomplished. I can't wait to see what you do in the coming years with all of these new opportunities. Please give her a follow, check out what she's doing, and thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and we thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.